The champagne flute nearly slipped from my fingers when I saw them together across the rooftop bar. Greg, my husband of 12 years, leaning just a little too close to Diane, my former boss, as she laughed at something he whispered. His hand brushed the small of her back in that familiar way, the same casual intimacy he used when guiding me through crowded rooms. I should have known something was wrong when Diane fired me 3 months earlier. Department restructuring, she'd said with that polished corporate smile, offering a generous severance that came with a strict non-disclosure agreement. Greg had been furious on my behalf, massaging my shoulders as I sobbed into my wine. Those soulless bastards, he'd muttered into my hair. You're better off without them. Now his lips moved near Diane's ear in a way that wasn't professional at all. At home that night, Greg was all affectionate concern. He poured me a glass of wine, the expensive Pinot Noir he knew I loved, and listened as I recounted the strange encounter at the bar. His reaction was perfectly measured. A frown of confusion, a reassuring squeeze of my hand, just the right amount of indignation on my behalf. I ran into Diane at the Chamber of Commerce luncheon last month. He explained smoothly. I mentioned the company was throwing a big holiday party and said she should stop by since I consult with so many of their vendors. You know how these networking things are. Of course. Greg's marketing firm handled accounts for half the businesses in the city, including several that supplied my former company. It made sense. Too much sense. I watched him move around our kitchen, my husband of 12 years, who still remembered to buy my favorite yogurt at the grocery store, who sent me silly memes during his lunch breaks. The same man who'd held me when I came home, sobbing after being fired, murmuring, "Their loss, baby. Their loss." Now I noticed how quickly he changed the subject to our weekend plans. The way his phone buzzed face down on the counter. The faint scent of peppermint on his collar when I hugged him goodnight. A scent I'd never bought him. But one I suddenly remembered Diane always wore. The next morning, I called an old coworker under the guise of catching up. "Oh yeah," she said casually. "Diane's been using your husband's firm for months. Started right after..." She trailed off awkwardly. "Right after she fired me," I finished. A beat of silence. "You didn't know?" I stared at the wedding photo on our mantel, Greg grinning as he fed me cake, both of us blissfully unaware that someday he'd be taking meetings with the woman who would destroy my career before destroying our marriage. The timing was too perfect, the connections too convenient. And worst of all, he'd been so careful to seem like the perfect, supportive husband through it all. I wore my lucky red dress to the company fundraiser, the one Greg always said made me look like a knockout. Again, Diane was invited. Diane's eyes flickered when we entered together, her smile tightening as Greg's arm settled around my waist. "You look rested," she said, her gaze dropping to my left hand, to the emerald ring Greg had given me for our 10th anniversary, now tainted by understanding. The pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. The sudden layoff, the way Greg had encouraged me to take time off before job hunting, the mysterious bonus that had paid for our Bahamas vacation, which he'd spent half of texting someone. I waited until we were in the Uber. "How long have you been fucking my former boss?" Greg's face went slack. The silence stretched so long, I thought he might deny it. Then his shoulders slumped. "Since the Christmas party," he admitted quietly. "The one you missed because of your migraine." The admission hurt worse than the betrayal. He'd brought me aspirin that night, stroked my hair until I fell asleep, came home smelling of winter air and peppermint. Diane resigned when HR started investigating, with a golden parachute, of course. Greg moved into a luxury apartment downtown, one I suspect she's paying for. Our divorce papers include an unusually generous alimony agreement, which my lawyer says reeks of hush money. Sometimes I catch our daughter studying family photos with a frown, sensing but not understanding why Daddy doesn't live here anymore. Last week, she asked if Aunt Diane, because yes, that monster had insisted on being called Aunt, would still take her to Broadway shows. I look at women in office buildings now and wonder how many of them are sitting across from their own Gregs, oblivious to the knife hovering above their backs. So I'll ask you this. When the person who knows every inch of your soul betrays you so completely, which pain cuts deeper? The loss of love or the annihilation of trust?